I think we'll kick off. I'd like each person to please, starting with Sumitra, can you please tell us a bit about, your family's philanthropic agenda, your commitment, individual, the family, and what sector? What's your approach?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sumitra. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm from a family business called Tolaram Group. I don't know if many of you know the name, but you may know one of our biggest brands in Nigeria, if you're from Nigeria. We are the family behind Indomie. So we've actually been around for about 70 years, and we started in Indonesia 70 years ago because we're a displaced population from what was India and Pakistan, well, what is India and Pakistan now. During the partition, we didn't really have a home anymore, so we relocated to Indonesia. And then subsequently moved into West Africa in the 70s, particularly Nigeria. So with the family business, I think we've spoken a lot about the generosity of Africans. And I'm optimistic. I think that everybody at some level is good and generous. And our family philanthropy also goes way back to great-great-grandfather's time. And it's very quite a nice story in the sense that philanthropy always started personally. And it was always, what can I do in my immediate circle or my immediate family? And that was my great-grandfather's way of starting it. And then subsequently, as time went on, we became more organizational giving. And then in the third generation, it was like, okay, we're going to go into CSR. And now we're fourth generation, which is me. And it's like, how are we going to institutionalize our philanthropy? So I'll touch a little bit about that and what we've done to do that later. But just a little bit about myself personally. I live in Singapore. This was my first home in Lagos, and this is still home at some level. I actually trained in Singaporean University as a medical doctor, and now I head the Family Foundation, which we just reincorporated 2 years ago. So I'll preface this entire conversation by saying this is a new role for me. I'm learning a lot from all of you. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll kind of take the next steps as we go along.
Absolutely, thank you. Aditya, could you maybe give us your sort of background and context of your philanthropic agenda?
Yeah, thank you, Bimpe. It's great to be speaking here. My father's in absentia, and I'm glad to step in his shoes. I've been working in our family business, which is a multi-generation business in Nigeria. I've been back since university for about 10 years, worked in various parts of the group of companies, and also at that same time that I came back, we had incorporated our charitable trust, or the welfare fund and trust fund we had set up in our company. We had set it up as a charity in Nigeria, and we started to implement some other programs at that time.
And I'll turn to Funke. Can you give us your context, please?
Thank you very much. So my name is Funke Shoneko, and I'm the project director for the Chris Ogubanjo Foundation. The foundation was set up 27 years ago. At that time, the vision and the aims and objectives were more or less for the promotion of education and academic research, as well as creating a stable country for Nigeria for peace and conflict resolution. My background is international hospitality and tourism management. And things are changing now, so we'll talk about that soon.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
And Holly, and I've purposely left you to the last because you probably are going to be intimidating in terms of the fact that you represent a global foundation, and this is the benchmark for what I think many African families, who want long-term sustainable philanthropic activity are probably looking towards. So you're the Africa director for the MacArthur Foundation, and perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit about how you came into that sort of role and what the MacArthur Foundation stands for today.
Thank you very much. There was this Nigerian in my village. He converted to Islam. And he said he wanted to change his name. And everybody said, no, hold on to your name. It's a good name. He said, no, he wants to change his name. So they mentioned to him all the good Muslim names, Muhammad, Ibrahim, Ahmad. He said, how about Angote? because he really wanted to take the name of Dangote because he thought that, taking the name of Dangote would be the best name that he could take. But I can see that this crowd doesn't understand the joke. So I definitely don't belong to any family of wealth. I was employed to work for the MacArthur Foundation. The foundation had a very long history, started in the 1978. I think that one of the legends about MacArthur was that he brought his friends and family. The only thing that he told them was that, look, I had figured out how to make money. Now you figure out how to spend it. That was the only charge that he gave them. By 1980, his wife also died. He died 78, his wife died in 1980. So since that time, the foundation has been run as an institution without any family affiliation. And if you can give me a second to make a propaganda about the MacArthur Foundation.
Please go right ahead.
My propaganda is that, as many of you may be aware, the foundation has launched this 100 and change campaign. And the idea is that, who has an idea that can be solved with $100 million? And about 1,800 organizations have applied. We have now 8 semi-panelists. In these 8 semi-panelists, we have about 5 of them which have Africa connection. So on December 11th, tune in and we'll hear which of the organizations have won that $100 million. The good news also is that
closed.
the application is closed.
There are people out here who want to apply.
The application is closed, but and because we work on transparency and accountability, we cannot do any backdoor process of doing that. But anybody who wants to really know more about the announcement, anyone who wants to actually go and attend, I'll be very happy to share the contact information and other things as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's interesting, like you just mentioned, that MacArthur decided, after he'd made a lot of money, when he died, he left $1 billion apparently to the board and said to them, and I told them before he died that they would get to decide. Can you tell us a bit about the structure? What has enabled, his wishes to continue to be, implemented? What is the board structure? What is the governance around the MacArthur Foundation that makes it effective?
Well, I think that I will say that is the vision and the focus on the structure, especially the governance structure, that really enabled the foundation to continue to be where it is so far. I think that one of the things that I have done over the last 10, 15 years is also to establish like 5 foundations in Nigeria. And I think that one of the things that I have seen is the clarity of vision. What is it that people really want to do? And what is the governance structure that is put in place to enable them to do what they really want to do? And I found that one of the foundations that I started to establish collapsed totally because there was a lot of conflict in terms of the vision of the organization and the governance structure of the organization. And I think that TY, Gerard Danjuma, I think hinted yesterday to some of the challenges whereby you have boards that are totally people with different visions. Partisan politics is another problem that I have noticed, which probably the MacArthur Foundation doesn't have to worry about that, but I know that some of the organizations I helped to establish, they were embedded in partisan politics, whereby the family members were divided along political lines, and therefore everything just collapsed as a result of that challenge and other. So I think that the governance structure, the vision and the commitment of the board to that vision probably will make the most important difference.
Great. So I take away clarity of purpose. Definitely, we need that. We need governance, and by governance, I think we mean some set of rules and regulations of how we interact. Whether Sumitra, could you tell us maybe a bit about your structure?
Yeah. So previously, we only really had to contend with the business, and when it was just the business, it was very simple because we had a shareholding structure. It was very simple because they made the decisions, and then it trickled down into management level. 2 years ago, we decided that while we were doing the succession planning and thinking about our legacy, I'm now already 4th generation, so there's many, many more of us. The family took on the decision to reincorporate the whole business as a trust. And in doing that, they set up an operational arm, which looked after the business, and a separate arm that looked after the family wealth, which was the family office. And then, inherent in the trust, we actually restructured to have the family members who were previously shareholders staying on as trustees, and then the foundation becoming the majority trustee by taking on a 25% chunk. So it actually became an owner of the business. So governance became slightly more complex because now you were no longer really taking leadership decisions at the trustee level. We decided to professionalize everything. So we had a separate professional board for the business, a separate professional board for the family office, and then a separate professional board for the foundation.
Okay, I mean, that sounds like it works. And maybe just to break it down, because I know that we're all in a different phase of, and at the end of the day, each one can do, what you're doing, but maybe start off and let it grow organically. And I'm looking at you because I'm thinking, from what we've discussed, you're also in the organic phase. So to the audience, yes, you could have a foundation, you could have a trust. These are both, I would say, legal animals that will just help you deploy your efforts. That makes it formal, makes it such that you have, again, some contractual obligations. There's some rules that actually mean that you all have to engage in a particular way. And so, Aditya, at your phase, I mean, their phase does sound like advanced. You apparently are sort of on your way. And how are you starting off, in your family's own foundation?
Yeah, I think we are at a pioneering stage, but there were some big steps taken already to put us in the path. And although I am a trustee and I get involved in the activities of the foundation, and I'm also involved in the management of our business, which funds our foundation, there are a lot more webs in there that I think we need to untangle. But I'm having fun doing both and straddling both. And I think one of the originating ideas of our foundation was, finding programs or activities we could do that made sense to our business in some way. And there is a kind of a cyclical relationship between the two that is there now, and that I'd like to see for a time, where there could be some benefit to the business for any activity that the foundation takes, and it grows and grows in ever-expanding circles.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that, again, these are families who, from their current business activity, you've decided to put a little pot aside and wrap it around in a trust or a foundation, and that pot is specifically for philanthropy. It means that the family business has to continue making money to fund that pot of philanthropy. In your case, you're actually a shareholder of the family business, so you hold the business to account. The business has to deliver returns. Without delivering returns, you don't have the money for philanthropy. Okay, what's your own game, or how do you play in this field?
Okay, our structure is formal. The Christokobanjo Foundation has 2 centers. So the first center is for the peace and conflict resolution, and then the second center is for the promotion of industrialization and private enterprises. And for each center, it has a management committee. It also has a programs committee, and it now has a financial committee. So it's very structured in that way. And the Christokobanjo Foundation also has a trust fund.
Okay.
So when it comes to our programs and activities, that is where the money is coming from.
Okay, so we're hearing a bit about how the funds are made available. Sumitra, what does your foundation do with that money that the family business is deploying? What are the activities that you do?
I'm just going to add on to what Funke just said as well. So, because you were talking about dependency on the business. So, inherent in having philanthropy, you don't want to ever have a situation where one year the business does badly and no more money, and then all your programs fall apart. So, we actually also derive money from the family office, and we also have an endowment. So, we do protect ourselves in that sense, and more importantly, we protect our programs. So just to clarify that point. So, the foundation prior to the foundation setup, we were doing a lot of ad hoc philanthropy, many different areas and way too many geographies. When we reincorporated 2015-2016, we now focus on 2 geographies only, Indonesia and Nigeria, and we focus mostly on education, specifically early childhood in Indonesia, early childhood, both education and development. We do some work in healthcare, but more complementary to education, so nutrition, immunizations, etc. And in Nigeria, we do a couple of small-scale projects, but we're looking to develop something more long-term here, probably in the employment space.
Okay, that's helpful. And Aditya, can you just briefly tell us what your own philanthropic activity is? What do you do?
Yeah, pretty simply. We started as a trust fund in our company, and we're doing a lot of welfare programs. The ones that we found to have the most traction were around self-education, so staff members applying to further their education and getting grants from us. We expanded that into a general scholarship fund for undergraduates and postgraduates. It is not subject bound, so we sponsor across subjects. We did limit to federal universities, and we support students in 7 federal universities. And then we had an opportunity to collaborate with the University of Lagos, and we have started operations in a center this year that we set up. And the focus is on entrepreneurship skills and resource.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. Now, I think that my next sort of question, again, this is probably, again, the way that philanthropy does end up evolving, even when it starts from, a family trust or a family foundation. Eventually, in order to make it sustainable, you do have to decide whether or not it stays as part of an arm of the family business, a department, or whether it becomes an independent institution, like the MacArthur Foundation, which then almost eventually may have nothing at all to do with the family other than the name it's carrying. And that may help collaboration, it may even help fundraising. Those are the models we see, and I don't know what your thoughts are. Is that what you seem to be moving towards, becoming an independent institution? What was Sumitra?
Well, I mean, we've just undergone one major transition, so we're not really thinking that far ahead yet. Of course, when my granduncle, who is the founder of the foundation and also the chairman of the business, in his mind, he definitely wants this to go on for years and years and years beyond him. So that's why we made this first shift. In terms of being an independent entity, I think independence is in a couple of phases. The first phase is being independent in terms of governance. So now, for example, apart from the fact that the business channels funds into the foundation, they don't get involved in our decision-making process. So we already have independence in that sense. We are incorporated as a completely separate entity. In terms of actually, and the second thing we did was actually decoupling from the business because we didn't want it to be the case that the foundation was serving the reputation of the business, for example. So that's why they have slightly different names, and they are 2 separate entities. At the moment, because we are not yet self-sustainable within the foundation, even though we have the endowment, for example, we are still semi-dependent. But I guess the intention is to move towards being sustainable. And inherently in that you become an independent entity because you're no longer dependent on money. But whether we want to completely decouple, I think it's less important to us in that sense, yeah.
Okay. I mean, just again, the MacArthur Foundation is a totally independent institution. Is it mandatory to have a family member on the board, for example?
No.
Not at all?
I'm not sure if any of them is alive, actually, I don't know.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And so it's, apart from the name and I would say the initial endowment, do you fundraise outside of the business of the MacArthur family then? Obviously, are his assets, the MacArthur assets still the main capital that you rely on?
Yeah, and I think one of our colleagues was here yesterday, Wale, who is now running Kuramo Investment and Capital. He was in our investment department in Chicago, and then he made a lot of money and left us and started his own business as well. And his job and the lack of others is to make money for us. And I know that we always quarrel with them because we ask them questions. Do you invest in environmentally unsustainable project? They will say, no, your job is to spend the money. Our own is to make the money. Don't ask those kind of questions. So the other people, we are not even different. We are in different floors so that they don't see us, we don't see them. they just make the responsibility to make them money, our responsibility just to spend the money. Yeah.
Well, that's not a bad model. At least you know that the money will come irrespective. Or are you sometimes concerned about the type of investments? Because especially maybe for families where they're still actively involved, perhaps they want the investments not to be contradictory to their own belief or their own ethics. Is that an issue?
Well, definitely it's a big issue. But having said what I said, which was really a joke, so don't say it anywhere else. Just to say that yes, the foundation is also looking for opportunities to work with other groups and organizations. We have relationship with a number of other foundations where we bring our resources together and see whether we can make bigger investments, and also trying to look at, are there people that, we can also help them to spend their resources much better and other things. Yeah. So we do all those kind of things. But clearly, yes, ethical issues are critical and very important. As you know, we work around environmental issues. It's always an issue that we really want to pay attention to in terms of the investments and other things that our people are making. But I don't know whether they will listen to us or not.
Okay. Well, thanks you for that clarification. Aditya, in terms of, again, this governance structure, I know again you're also evolving. Where's your learning curve? How are you finding what's the right fit? Because it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, the learning curve will continue to curve as well, and because I guess part of it is that as you start to see the landscape of where your intervention is focused, then you see more opportunity or more need. And I think the hardest part about, say, an entrepreneur-led philanthropic initiative is maintaining focus.
In fact, if I might interrupt, I know that Sumitra, you do this full-time. You actually run the foundation full-time. You're running a business as well. And I think many people will really share that pain with you, Aditya, that you're running a business and also supposed to be running the family foundation and looking out for opportunities or ideas. Has outsourcing that, foundation role, is that something, or at least having third-party managers involved, is that something you've thought about?
Yeah, well, we didn't outsource, but we did hire a management team. And we had, I guess, two versions of the management team. And one really helped. I had to hire somebody when we started the initiative at University of Lagos, because there was a lot of work that had to go on with the university, and as well as in plans and preparations. And it was an ambitious project, so we started designing a curriculum, and those are things that I would not even know where to start. And then it got into the implementation stage, and we changed our management team, and I have a young team of 2 people right now running the center at the university.
Okay. And Funke, this is something you do full time?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the founder is very much still active.
Right.
So
Okay.
he is still part of the decision making.
Okay.
So
So your governance is very much within a tight-knit family.
yes,
setup.
it is. It
Okay.
is. But what we're trying to do now is get the next generation involved,
Okay.
and
Okay.
we will be restructuring certain
Okay.
roles just so that we can be empowered.
Before we go, because that's going to be another sort of side topic, this issue of getting the next generation involved. Let's not forget the topic is harnessing the strength of family foundations. And I look around the room and I think many families are probably doing similar philanthropy. I just want each of you to give us thoughts about, collaboration. How can we, I think and someone said earlier, if we're stronger together, how can we ensure that we can harness what each foundation is doing without taking anything away from your individual agendas? But how can collaboration happen? Is the APF the ideal platform? Just your thoughts, Funke.
Okay, so within the foundation, we applied the 5 C's. And the 5 C's is, the first one is you have to connect,
Okay.
then you have to communicate, then you collaborate, then you co-create for change. So that is what we apply when we're saying the next generation, within the family first, then with potential next generation leaders.
Okay. Great. And Sumitra?
I think philosophically speaking, it's good to have the vision of the founder, and it's good to have the collective wisdom of the family and take what they want to do out there. But in a family business and in a family foundation both, it doesn't necessarily mean that the family is the best place to do it. And I think we have to make that distinction with the family. So we have a lot of tension with my older family members where it's like, we want to do this. I'm like, none of us are equipped to do this. So we do understand that we have to take what you want to do as a founder and as a funder and say, okay, great, you have the vision, but let's give it to somebody who is better placed to do this, to actually execute. And that way everybody wins, and most importantly, what we're trying to get done gets done well.
And that's great, just a great philosophy. And the MacArthur Foundation, would that be through giving grants? So how do you sort of engage with other either foundations or other philanthropists who are on their journey? How do you encourage others?
Well, clearly, I think that our natural friends and allies are usually Open Society, Initiative for West Africa, the Ford Foundation. I mean, those are the first calls always. Whenever anyone has a problem. So when somebody, I don't know, whether Ndidi calls me and say, I need money, something, I say, no, I don't have money, but let me talk to Open Society. That's my job, and just pass it on to them. When they have problem, they pass it on to me. But we also have some, initiatives together. For example, we are supporting the three foundations, supporting Trust Africa here to do a number of work in the country. But also because we also encourage our grantees to work together. And so that's why, for example, if you look at our grant making system, we really make our grants in cohorts. So for example, June, we are going to make all the grants on media. So all our grantees on media will work together, develop the proposal together, work on the theory of change together, look at their impact, and all the things that they will go together.
Do your grantees have to be well established? Do they have to have track record, or is the fact that someone has put their hands in their pocket to set up something and says, well, to go further, to make it impactful, to scale it, I need partnership from the MacArthur Foundation, and I'm sure there are people in this room doing amazing things who are struggling to scale up. I mean, how should they approach you? Not for your checkbook, but what can you give? What encouragement can you give? I would say our budding philanthropists.
Well, some of our grantees are actually a little bit dangerous for us.
Dangerous.
Yeah, because I don't know why we do what we do, but we do it. For example, we are trying to support Jennifer Diary. And I said, well, Jennifer Diary, this woman has never written a proposal in her life in terms of like real civil society proposal. She never written this one. She doesn't know anything about NGO work and her things. She's a business person. She makes her money and her things. So we take those kinds of risks. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. It's always a mixed bag, actually. But I think that is also what is really useful about private foundations. You have to take the risk. Because it's only through taking the risk that you can get some of the big bucks. Some of them will fail. There's no doubt about that one. And then you just have to move on, and then hopefully that you get some of them that will actually pay off much more than whatever you have invested in. So I think that taking the risk is really part of the culture, and don't expect that everything has to be just glamorous, and it doesn't happen that way.
Thank you for that. Aditya, collaboration. What have you got to say?
Yes, extremely important, and definitely not worth people trying to start from scratch, and finding the right partners so that even if it's not about, what is the shared benefit? I mean, how do the collaborating partners really come together and work together in a 50-50 way, as opposed to somebody taking the lead and just being backed? It's a big question.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next sort of, I would say, theme, and I think it's a really important issue, is how to make sure the next generation engage. Whether we're talking about Generation X, Generation Y, the millennials, once Papa, Mama had put their hand in their pocket and set something up, and you're How many generations are you, Sumitra? 4. And you're probably
Third.
And you're...
I have 2 numbers.
Sorry?
I have 2 numbers.
You have 2 numbers. There you go. So, I mean, but what are you doing, each of you in your space, to ensure that the framework and the structure you're putting together and the way the governance is run is making sure that you're engaging with the teens? We don't really feel we should wait till they're in their 20s. We want philanthropy to start really from the cradle if we can. How do you approach this, Sumitra?
So our next generation is my current generation, the 4th generation. I'm one of the older members, so I do have fairly young cousins. It isn't something that we initially were doing in a very structured way, but I think inherent in the family foundation part of it, we have to be responsible for those family members being a part of the conversation. And it's easy for us to say, okay, the way you're going to get involved is we're going to get your input. But actually what we really want from them is to teach them how to become responsible givers. So one of the things we're doing in our foundation is we have got a couple of different funding pools for our programs, et cetera. One of them is to do with a grant, and that's open to next-gen family members. And we tell them in the grant, you are going to tell us your idea, what are you passionate about, what area do you want to give in, and teach them how to get a structure around that, like in terms of putting a budget together, putting a presentation together in terms of what objectives they want to meet, and then saying, okay, we'll pair you with a board member. They're going to be your mentor. They're going to take you through this timeline of 6 months or 1 year. At the end of it, you tell us what you've learned. It doesn't have to be a successful program, but we want them to be responsible in their approach. So that's one way to engage them.
It sounds like another model of your $100 million competition. And I think that's a really, really innovative way of doing it. And it sounds very possible. It doesn't sound like it's rocket science.
And enjoyable.
And enjoyable,
both
absolutely.
Because you engage the elder gen as well, and they get to mentor.
Yes.
So it becomes something that does more than just give. It's also getting everybody engaged.
Absolutely.
So it's fantastic.
And maybe refreshing the ideas around philanthropy so it doesn't get stale. Funke, you're actually the anchor person for Nexus. And Nexus is, I would say, an association of next generationers for Nigeria. And so maybe you can have your own perspective.
Okay, so I'm the co-outreach ambassador for Nexus, and that's also next generation philanthropy as well as impact investing and social entrepreneurship. So for Nexus, what we're doing, which is still something we can integrate with some of our own next generation workshops, is bringing people together through networking. So what we do is we try to encourage like-minded individuals who understand philanthropy or who understand the art of giving to come together. And we will also be hosting workshops as well. And that is for capacity building, to more or less guide them. And also, it's working groups, which is more or less having like a theme where you can actually discuss topics for next generation philanthropy.
Well, great, and that's the Nigerian space or African space?
In the Nigerian space.
Well, great. I mean, it sounds like these are the next members and leaders of the APF coming on. And Aditya, again, next generation, how are you, your family engaging and making sure that, they will also come on board?
Yeah, so that was where the 2 numbers came, where I feel I'm a second generation, as well as beyond that from the history. But the business that we're in has been reinvented over generations, and probably will continue to be reinvented. And so then it's just my father and me in Nigeria working in the business. So there is no next generation yet beyond. But I think to flip the question would be on engaging the generations above again. And obviously for me, some sort of hands-on activity is always great to inspire myself to see what the immediate impact has on the activity, but also on myself, and vice versa. So I think at lunch we were talking about the center at the university, and somebody proposed the idea of my dad teaching a course there, and I thought that would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Great, yes, absolutely. Time. Philanthropy is also giving time, not just money, for sure. And colleague, so I'm going to go back to that prize, $100 million prize. It sounds like that's an initiative to encourage the next big philanthropists if I'm correct. Or maybe there's a different way of looking at it. Is that right?
So you asked me a question. Since I'm going to answer the question, I can answer the way I want to answer it.
Absolutely. That's what you're here for.
Because, whenever I meet young people, I ask them, do you know MKO Abiola? And most of them, they shake their head. Or they will say, oh, yeah, I read about him in The Sun. Is he the one, his wives or something? Or, so the point I'm trying to make is that really, if you look at Nigeria, people like MKO Abiola, who probably have given more resources, more support to Nigerians than all the MacArthurs and the Ford Foundations and others, because he was really truly a philanthropist in this country. But sadly, because his own philanthropy was not a strategic one, there was no institutional framework, there was nothing that he left behind, the younger generation of Nigerians only know him in a very negative sense. Not the work that he has done as Abiola, who, when you have problem with scholarship, you say you are in Oxford, Baba, I don't have money for school fees, so you write a check and send it to you. I want to go to Jerusalem, or I have this problem, or I have only this one, you write a check and give it to you. That was how Abiola was. He was one of the best philanthropists that we ever had in this country, but he never established an institutional framework to do the work that he did. So I think that when we're talking about the next generation of things, so my own appeal to all other Nigerians is that please, let's try and do something so that the next generation of people do not think of us or talk about us in negative sense. But let's look at the work that we have done when we're alive, institutionalize it so that tomorrow they will always remember the good work that people like MKO Abiola and others have done.
Thank you. And fantastic. I think you've read my mind, because literally the last question you've sort of started us on the last 10 minutes. And I really was going to ask everyone to, each of you, what's your message in terms of what should other families who are looking at philanthropy, starting it, have engaged in it, what's your message? How should they do it to ensure scalability, impact, and ensure that it becomes their family's own legacy? So you've answered that question and set us off. Sumitra.
Okay, so sustainability is a very big word. We unpacked it a little bit earlier with some of the other panelists over the last 2 days. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned doing this year, and I think the big takeaway that we very briefly touched on yesterday, was ultimately in a foundation setting you can do X amount. Your business can do XXX amount. So being a recipient of funds from the business, the most important thing for me as a family member as well is to ask myself where my corporate dollars are coming from. And what am I going to do using my voice and my foundation being a direct owner to say to the business, what are you doing to ensure that your corporate dollars are good enough for me to spend in philanthropy? Because your philanthropy can only go so far. It is an important part of the giving space. But if you have a big business, your business can do so much more. That's my takeaway.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay.
I think in answering this question, I'm going to use a personal answer, which is, first of all, for anyone that's setting up or has a foundation for the next generation, you have to involve the next generation, whether it's on the committee or having the next generation intern or volunteer. You have to more or less be integrated from the start, because that's the only way you can actually even have a voice. And I think we've been lucky in the foundation because the founder is still active, but he also trusts us. So he has empowered each and every one of us to find our own passion, find our own dream, and use the foundation to express ourselves.
Fantastic. Thank you. Aditya, what's your message?
My message would be about channeling the vision, creating a vision, seeing how you can achieve that in a reasonable way, and just get on the road, just get involved somehow, don't overcomplicate it.
Great. Well, I must say thank you very much. I have to just add my own sort of 2 pence worth to say that I'm impressed and really, really fortunate to be part of a continent that's now, taking not just baby steps, but giant steps in philanthropy. And the other thing I would say is, research has shown that families who engage in strategic philanthropy, just like you referred to, tend to be the ones whose legacy lasts the longer. And the legacy may not necessarily just be the legacy of their philanthropy, but the legacy of their business. And the more consciousness around philanthropy that exists in a family, the more the business ethics are also, a primary concern. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'd like to wrap up that session and say thank you again to Funke Shonekon, to Sumitra Tolaram, to Kole Shatima, and to Aditya Chellarams. Thank you for, I think, a very enriching panel. Then call on Mosun Layode to please come in and introduce the speaker for the closing remarks. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry, can you all come back? Apparently, we need to find out if anybody wants to ask questions. I was looking at time, and I'm very conscious. Sorry, where I come from, we make sure we don't push the boundaries with time. So I do apologize. If questions, comments are very welcome. If anyone has questions, this is the time. Please say your name.
Nimi Akinkube, Bestman Games. To Sumitra and Aditya, I've just found from my wealth management experience that many Nigerian families don't leave that legacy from one generation to the next. And what I've found is we tend to bring our children in at a much more senior level, sometimes at executive director, CEO. Could you tell us did you start very, very early? Were you doing holiday jobs, vacation jobs, and so on? How do you have this legacy and how family businesses can sort of transit from generation to generation? Thank you.
Yeah, I could start there because I had the direct impact of graduating from university and just coming back on holiday a few months later because I had my own plans. And I woke up and I met my dad at the breakfast table, and he looked at me and he said, "You can't go to the office dressed like that." And I said, "Okay, fine." And literally, I shadowed him for a couple of months, and just got thrown into the deep end. And I can't say that is the right thing to do, but that's what I went through, and so I can't tell you about the other side either. But I do believe, honestly, that learning about the business, which I did learn, but no summer jobs, as it were. Learning and getting through a proper orientation of the business and working as opposed to just being flung in and a founder or an owner's son or relative is a tricky place to be in.
My experience is slightly different. I come from a family, we're 3 girls in my family, and to be very honest with you, I had no idea we had a family business growing up. And on top of that, I'm not even sure, because I had no idea, I don't know if that came first, or I had no interest, and therefore no one spoke to me about it. But it only came to me when I was getting older and I started to ask myself where my opportunities came from, that my father sat me down and said, okay, this is kind of what I do. So I would say, even before the wealth management discussion and all of that, it's really just talking to your kids about what we do. Like, what does your dad do on every day? Like, or your mom do every day when she goes to the office? And opening up that conversation for them to also ask questions back. One of the things we've done in the family when we did the whole reincorporation was also to set up a family constitution and a family assembly, more importantly. This is only, our first family assembly was this year, so it's new. But that, I was surprised. When we all sat down to have that discussion, even the youngest member of the family was asking so many questions. Like, what do you guys do? What does the business do? Why did we move to Africa to do business? And the interest level was surprising to the shareholders. So I think we underestimate how you can actually have those conversations even with very young people. And how you frame it matters. It's not just about the business, but it's really on a day-to-day, very fundamentally, this is who we are as an identity, as a family. And that family business narrative is actually weaved into that. So I think just conversational level before it becomes something formalized.
Hi, good evening. My name is Katya, and I run an organization that's creating and curating content on African philanthropy. And I've been involved in a few studies, global studies on philanthropy recently, and one of the biggest challenges is finding indigenous family foundations that are operational, that have a website, that have data, that have an annual report even. And I wanted to ask this panel, what do we need to do to encourage more family foundations and maybe even corporate foundations to share information and to actually measure their work and put it out for those who are trying to learn about philanthropy or study it from the academia side of things, for that information to be readily available? Thank you.
Would you like to take that, Khalid, or maybe?
I can say a few things. I mean, historically, there have been several attempts really to establish philanthropic organizations in this country. The one that I know, there was one of our colleagues, Leslie Obiora. She was the Minister for Solid Minerals, and at some point, she started discussing about the idea of stimulating philanthropy in Nigeria. And she brought together a number of people. Some of you were here. Some of you here were at those meetings. Several meetings were held, actually. Try to see, how can we stimulate philanthropy in Nigeria. And then, of course, after that, I know that Tiwa and Anjua Foundation have also started a similar thing along those lines, trying to bring together people on how do you stimulate philanthropy in Nigeria. I know that Didi and the African Philanthropy Forum here also, Ford Foundation also, did a number of work on, how do we really take this issue to, and then yesterday, myself and Lola Dare, and this morning we met with Sunday and said, look, we need somebody somewhere to really, first of all, get to call people to a breakfast meeting or something. Somebody with some status that can do that one. And then, to begin to share their own experience and knowledge about how this is done, how it has been done in different parts of the world and other things. And maybe through those kinds of conversations and other things, we may be able to encourage our people to do it and to do it better. And I think that, and then that's where the documentation comes in. Because just like with the example of Abiola, just not documented. That is why we don't know what he did. So I think that the question of documentation is critical and very important. What is our experiences are, how other people have done this thing and other things that can be done. But maybe part of it is that this forum may also think about whether we need a section on family foundations and try to see whether that section of the family foundations will actually begin to document, encourage, and have informal networking with others, and see that may be one way of actually stimulating some of those ideas that you are thinking about as well.
If I can just add to that, I think it's awareness. The APF is a fantastic forum. I'm aware that there's a toolkit online for just how to set up your own foundation. But I also feel that the advisors that a lot of families rely on, their lawyers, would be a good place for the APF to also build awareness around how to be strategic and how to have structures. You mentioned Abiola's family. If someone had probably educated him and told him that perhaps if you have a foundation or a trust with governance, constitutions, these are all legal documents, and we will start seeing the growth. But I think we're making a good start, but there's a lot of work still to be done.
Can I just add to that as well? I think it's a really good point because I've also struggled to find that exact. I'm looking to role model after someone who I think is doing a good job in this space, and they are. It's not that they're not, but there's maybe not that many. Two things. One, I think, is there's a reason for it, apart from the fact that many family foundations use a very traditional approach and don't think of themselves as professional foundations. The second reason is many families prefer to be anonymous in their giving. And there is merit in that. I don't think they do it because they don't want to be transparent and they don't want to be accountable. I think it's really just a very personal thing to give, especially when you're doing very community-based giving. So I do think that there are reasons for it, but I also think that there's a shift. As we see big foundations become more professionalized, I think family foundations are becoming more aspirational. So I'm hoping that if we have this forum again next year or the year after, more and more we'll start to see that family foundations are taking that on, both to be accountable and transparent, and also just to be able to say we are doing good work, and this is something that we should tell other families that you can also do it. So I hope that we can become an example eventually, if we're able to do this well, and then say to other families in the networks, whether it's Nexus or whether it's APF or the Family Business Network or whatever it is, to say, can we role model and learn from one another?
We have time for probably one more question, if anyone has a question or comment.
My name is Sunday, Tiwa Danjuma Foundation. Oftentimes, I heard Kole mention that grants fail, you give out money and then it fails. And it may not be particularly peculiar to family foundations, but people feel, oh, this family has money, let me go get some. And then they just take the money and they don't do anything about the project. So what do we do? How do we ensure that we minimize such failures in our grants?
It's for you, colleague. Would you like to start off?
Well, I can start off by saying that yes, I think that we will all do our due diligence in terms of ensuring that the documentation is right. We go and see that this is a real organization. Check with the laundering or anti-laundering institutions, and do all the things that I think we are all supposed to do in terms of due diligence and other things. But I'm always open to the possibility that, look, it's just one mistake will happen and everything that I'm doing can just go down the tube. I think that is just, I'm always open to that possibility that, something that I have never envisaged, something that I never on my radar will happen, and all that I am set out to do will not have happened. And I think that that is one of the things that I have come to terms, that not everybody that we are going to support will succeed. Some of them, they don't have control over it actually at all. So for example, you go and support someone. Yesterday, everything was good and fine in Maiduguri 2 years ago and 3 years. Nobody respected Boko Haram to be such a menace in this country. And then you give the grant, and then because of Boko Haram, they never succeed in implementing the project. What do? You can't buy them AK-47 to go be fighting Boko Haram. So what are you going to do? So these are some realities, I think, that I just want us to realize that, yes, we should do our due diligence, we should do everything that we need to do. But the truth of the matter is that there are situations whereby we give our grantees all the best of support. Everything that needs to be support. They will be there, Boko Haram will come, they will first of all run for their life. That is the most important thing they should do. And and we have failed. And
Okay, well, thank you. I think we've got one last question. This is because
one quick question. For various reasons, some people might feel that a family foundation isn't the right vehicle. So between a family foundation and just ad hoc giving, is there any other vehicle you might suggest? Maybe a living will, or I don't know what the legal term might be. Thank you.
What other structures are available? You're absolutely right. If I can maybe, I'll just say something, and maybe Sumitra can add something as well, or Funke. Not one size fits all, like we said earlier. It could be a foundation, it could be a family trust, but even if you're just starting, it could be setting up a company and saying that actually, whatever the money, that the capital of that company is for, in the memorandum of the company, the objectives are for a philanthropy objective. And it could be, yes, when you start, if you do it on a personal basis, the problem with that is, scalability and actually keeping it going in a sustainable way. A will or an endowment. So for example, in your will, you do say that I'm going to leave X amount and I should go to a particular activity. It might not be to your family foundation. You could be donating. Everyone doesn't have to create their own. So maybe Sumitra wants to just add something.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things you can do actually. I think you can get really, really creative, and we create structures so that we can have structure. But it doesn't mean that you have to follow those structures. The reason why you do is because you want to build some kind of sustainability in that, and you want to be able to have something credible. But I mean, there's a few ways you can do it. If you want to do something of your own, of course, there's everything from the NGO to the social enterprise to the foundation to impact investing to whatever you want to do if you want to do it yourself. But there are so many great organizations already doing great work. So give your money away if you have to. Set up a donor-assisted fund. That's another option where you can control where it goes in the timeline that suits you, and you don't have to do the execution of it. I mean, we could go on forever talking about the different things. I'm happy to have that chat with you later, but certainly you can get creative depending on your limitations.
Well, thank you. I think, like I said, we can go on for much longer, but I think we do have to round up now. And we'd like to invite Mr. Gbenga Oyebode, who is a member of the advisory board of the APF, to give his closing remarks. I'm sure he's going to be here shortly. Thank you again. Please, a round of applause for my panelists. Thank you.